Welcome back. This is the first in a series of lessons where we'll learn about databases. This lesson will look at what a database is, and we'll contrast two types of database, the flat file and the relational database. And if you're my student, then we'll begin the database workbook. In general, a database is a loose term. It means a collection on a computer of typically a server, a collection of all the data on a particular topic, or possibly all the data that's needed for a particular task or project. Sometimes even all the data that is known and held by an organization. A database is constructed of entities with attributes. So an entity in a database is similar to an object in object-oriented programming. That is a real life. It might be a thing, a person, a place, an event. In any case, the items of data that we store are not just isolated items of data, but they are facts about entities, just like the way that facts in OOP are attributes of objects. And the collection of all the attributes is called the record of an entity. So a record in many ways is very similar to an object or class in OOP, but we don't have methods, we just store the attributes. And the simplest way to store all the facts that we've got is to put them into a great big flat file, a big square table. You could do this, for instance, with spreadsheets or with a word processor or with a very simple database software, and we create one big table that's got all the facts that we want. All the facts about an individual entity are stored as rows of the table. So let's say you've got 10 customers, you'd have 10 rows to your table. And the columns are the different facts or attributes that we've stored. So we might have the customer's first name in one column and their email address in another column, and so on. So if you're my student, I've prepared you an example of one, and I've just brought that up on the screen. These are just made up people, and they're just different orders, product orders from different customers. You'll see straight away that some of the customers have placed several orders. So the same customer comes up several times, and particular products, these are all printers, have been sold multiple times. So the same printer name comes up many different times. So a flat file is a very simple structure, and you only have to create a single table, but it is really not the most satisfactory way of storing data. So as I described this, can you think of any reasons why a flat file database is really not the best way to store our data for our business? Well, there are a number of different disadvantages. I could sum it up like this. If you're storing all the information you've got in your business in one table, that table is going to be storing information about lots of different kinds of entities. For example, printers and people are mixed up in that table that I showed you just now. Printers and people have got very different attributes, so it doesn't really make sense to store them all mixed up together. There's data replication. As you saw immediately, the same facts are coming up in more than one place, and that makes it very risky. It's extra work typing in the data, and it's extremely likely that we might store the data inconsistently. That is, show somebody's name in two different ways, or fail to update all the prices of the printers correctly. So all of these disadvantages mean that unless you've got a very, very simple task at hand, a flat file database is probably not the right solution. The solution is to store your data well, there's more than one solution, but a good solution is to store your data in a relational database. And when we create a relational database, we put each kind of entity into a different table. And that means that we can design each table to have just the right attributes for that entity. And every fact, this is if the database is set up properly, every fact should be stored once only. So if that fact changes, like somebody's email address changes, we only need to change it in one place. So I'll just walk you gently through the process of creating a relational database. In real life, of course, somebody who's going to do this would visit the company they were designing the database for and do an intensive study of what data they need and talk to people about how the data is used. I'm just going to simplify the process and just talk you through it step by step. The steps are identifying the different entities. So we've seen two so far, printers and customers. Make a table for each type of entity and then link the tables to show, for example, that a customer has bought a particular printer. These are the relations, and that's why it's called a relational database. A good starting point for making a database is to create an entity relationship diagram, also called an ERD. What you would do is think about or find out from your study all the different entities that we are storing data for. For example, in this example, customers and products. We draw a square or rectangular box for each entity, each different type of entity. And if there's any relationship between the two entities, we draw a line between them. Now, clearly there is a relationship between customers and products because the customers buy the products. A relationship can be any sort of relationship. Purchasing is just an example of a link between the two items that we want to record. We also have to think about whether these links are one-to-one or one-to-many. So, and we just have to think about, reflect on what we know about what's happening in this organisation. So in this organisation, as in most, one customer can buy many different products. Over the years, they might keep coming back and buy many different products. So we draw that by drawing 3 lines at the end. Obviously, it's not going to be exactly 3 products necessarily, but that's just the convention of how we draw it. So it looks a bit like a bird's foot, doesn't it? So we've shown here that one customer can buy many different products by drawing that 3 lines at the end. And this is called a one-to-many relationship. One customer buying many different products. But hang on a minute, also one product could be bought by many different customers. So a particular Hewlett-Packard printer might be bought by several different customers. So do we have to draw the line in the other direction as well? Well, this is called a many-to-many relationship because we've got the 3 lines at both ends. One product can be bought by many customers and one customer can buy many products. This is therefore a many-to-many relationship and we're not allowed to have those in a relational database. So what's the solution? Are we going to limit our customers to a single product each? No. What we do is we add a new entity. If we haven't got one already, we invent it, and that entity sits in between the 2 other entities and removes the many-to-many relationship. Sometimes it takes a little bit of thought to work out what that entity should be, but very often it's an order. So one customer will make many orders and one product will be included in many orders. but each order will link one customer to one product. In a bigger business, you may have it even more complicated than that, because there may be many products to each order, but we'll leave it at this for now, just so that we can use a relatively simple example. So in this example, each order links one customer to one product. We no longer have many-to-many relationships, and that means our ERD is ready to go. We now need to look at each of the entities in our ERD and think about what data we need to store, what attributes we need to include for each entity. A good business practice is to only store data that you need, and business analyst will typically look at what data is currently being stored, for example about customers, and think whether that data is needed or not. In fact, under data protection, you're not allowed to store irrelevant information about people anyway, so you should be trimming your database down to just the facts that you need for your business. Now you're ready to start making the database. Look at the ERD. It will have a number of squares joined, or rectangles joined by lines. Each one of those entities becomes a table in your database, and your list of attributes, the facts that we're going to store about each entity, they will become the columns of the database table. So you're nearly ready to go now with your database, but first we have to think about keys. It's important that you can identify each item, each entity in the table from all the other entities. So you might easily have two customers with the same name. I'm sure that happens quite often. For this reason, every entity is given a unique, typically a code number, but something that is unique to each entity. This is called the primary key. It's usually a code number, and it's usually column 1 of the table. Quite often, the software, the computer, will make these codes automatically. So when you add a new customer, it'll just generate a customer number for them. And the primary key lets you identify each customer so that the different customers with the same name don't get mixed up. So I've gone through the basics of creating a relational database, starting with an entity relationship diagram and ERD. If you're my student, there's an activity now to do this, to turn a flat file database into a relational database, questions 1 to 5 in the relational database workbook. We'll continue next lesson looking at how we create the relationships that link the tables of our database. So bye for now.